In this episode, we will explore how to navigate big feelings following the election in the United States. This is essential for you as a business owner because you have a vision to help people through your business. And to do that, you need to be able to work with the big feelings coming about the election or even about your business in general, as well as to be able to work with the parts who hold them so that you can direct your focus, your energy on doing the work you came here to do. You'll walk away with a clear plan to work through these big feelings and find your way. So, if you're struggling with the results of the election or big feelings in general, this episode is for you. Welcome to the Self Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah. So I want to let you know I'm actually recording this episode on Thursday, November 7th. So it is one day after we learned the results of the presidential election in the United States. And you might be wondering, why are we covering what to do after that in a podcast for ADHD women entrepreneurs? And I want to answer that. So, part one, many ADHD women and neurodivergent people, I shouldn't say all neurodivergent people, I know for sure autistic folks and ADHDers tend to be highly sensitive. Not everyone, but a lot of us tend to be highly sensitive. We tend to feel things deeply. We tend to have a lot of empathy and compassion. And we also tend to have a strong sense of social justice. We care about the world. In fact, that's why you're probably listening to me, because you're someone who has a business that is going to, in some way, help someone, or hopefully more than someone, right? Someone besides just yourself, people besides just yourself. And so, because that is true, a lot of people with ADHD, autism are feeling big feelings right now. This is particularly true. I'm noticing it in myself as a woman. I'm also noticing it in other women who I work with, who I know, women I serve, as well as people of color and the queer community. A lot of my clients who are gay or trans have really been struggling. And that's not wrong. I think this is huge, what has happened. And I want to dig into why. But before we get into that, the reason that's important for ADHD women entrepreneurs is because if you are in the big feelings of it, if you're stuck or shut down for an extended period of time, that is going to hamper your ability, interfere in some way with your ability to do what you need to do for your business. It's going to get in the way of you doing here the work you came here to do. And to be clear, that doesn't mean we should bulldoze over it or push it aside or not address what's coming up. In fact, it's the exact opposite of that. And that's what we're going to get into today. So that's why we're covering it. And hey, I get it. If you're like, yeah, I'm not feeling those feelings, Jen, then maybe this episode is not one you're really going to resonate with. However, I will say one of the things we talk about is uncertainty and how we deal with uncertainty, how we deal with big feelings. And so maybe you're not having big feelings or uncertainty about the election results, but maybe something else. And so if that is you, keep listening. So I've been noticing, like I said, big feelings in lots of us, many of these feelings in my own self. I've been noticing fear, At first, I've noticed in myself complete and utter shock, as well as some numbing. I'm noticing that in others, the shock and the numbing. I'm noticing big amounts of fear, lots of sadness, some grief, especially from my younger folks that I know who are maybe Gen Z and they have all these big hopes and dreams and they have some fears that those things won't be able to happen now. And so there's some grief in that, as well as anger. Although I think the anger is smaller right now as we sit with the immediate results. The anger might be bigger as this podcast drops like a week and a half from now, 2 weeks from now. So, but I want to speak to it because all of this is valid. These feelings are super valid, whatever is coming up for you. Because the fact of the matter is, first of all, uh, things are uncertain, right? Things are less certain than they were because some of the things that have been promised by the president elect, including things from Project 2025 and what Elon Musk says he will do when he's part of the administration, those are big, scary things. And if they are able to do the things that they say they're going to do, which sometimes follow through isn't everyone's strength, just say it that way. Uh, but if they do, that's a scary reality for a lot of us. It's a scary reality. And yet there's uncertainty because we don't know if they can actually, first of all, if they have the wherewithal to follow through. But second of all, we don't know what our government can do to stop that or if it's even possible. Right? Because on the one hand, I believe we need three-quarters of Congress to back an amendment change so that perhaps that can't be done. But a lot of us aren't really certain. We're like, what if he does an executive order? So there's all these questions that are unanswered. And it's leading to a lot of fear. And I was talking to one of my colleagues at my private practice yesterday, and we were talking about the things I was talking about, some of these things. And I said, "Oh, geez, I don't mean to stir up your stuff right before we go into session." And she's like, "No, normally," and this was brilliant what she said, "but normally we talk with clients about not catastrophizing things. Not we address limiting beliefs around like, hey, let's not get into the worst case scenario and catastrophize what can happen." And yet some of what has been promised, if that does become a reality, is some of the stuff of what we would normally call catastrophizing. Some of the stuff of some of our nightmares. And so I want to validate the feelings and I really want us to be able to lean into that because it's valid. And while it's important not to get stuck in the big feelings, both because it's not great for your life and your health and all those things, but also because it's going to impede your ability to do what you came here to do in your business, we need to hold space. We need to hold space for the feelings. We need to hold space for the different parts of ourselves having the big feelings. And sure, from this, there are lessons in like, how do we navigate uncertainty in our business? Because right now we're navigating uncertainty in our country. How do we navigate big feelings when they come up, when something doesn't go as intended in our business, which is what we're practicing navigating in another area right now, post election. And so there is real world value in working through this and taking this opportunity to become stronger. What's coming to mind for me, and I wasn't planning on talking about this, I don't know if any of you watched Brene Brown's, I think it was her Netflix documentary when she told this story. And she might have told it in one of her other her other like TED Talks, YouTube things on YouTube, something like that. But she tells a story. She was on the way to go speak somewhere. And for those of you who don't know Brene Brown, she's a shame and vulnerability researcher. She's done amazing other research on top of that as well. And she talks a lot about how there is strength in vulnerability, and the vulnerability can help reduce shame, and that it is a courageous act to be super vulnerable. So those of you who don't know her, I'm going to let you in on the not really joke, but the humor in it beforehand. But she's sitting on a plane and there's a guy next to her who does not know who she is, which believe me, if it was me, I'd be like, "Hey." Actually, I'd probably try and leave her alone because I'd feel bad that she doesn't have private time, but maybe she does, I don't know. But anyway, he said, "Oh, where are you going?" She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna present at a conference." And he said, "Oh, what are you gonna present on?" And she said, "Courage and vulnerability," or something like that. And he goes, "Oh, those are pretty opposite." And in her documentary, she's like, I took a breath and I thought to myself, do I want to spend this whole flight explaining to him how they are exactly the same? How courageous it is to be able to have vulnerability. And she was like, nope. So she didn't, which I applaud. I don't think anyone has to work for free like that. That's a lot of work. But at any rate, it can feel like the vulnerability that's coming up, that these big feelings are weak, and that might even be some of what is portrayed going forward. But I wanna say it takes courage to face the feelings that you're having head on. It is, in the short term, much easier to just push them down. But I know that pushing feelings down isn't effective, right? You've probably heard me say it's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can do it for a while, but eventually, first of all, it's really hard, but eventually also that beach ball will explode to the surface, often not when you expect it, right? And that is the same with emotions. You can push them down for a while, but eventually they'll breach the surface, usually in really inconvenient ways at inconvenient times. And sometimes it will explode out at other people. Sometimes it will implode and come out as chronic health issues and disease. So it's important to understand that when we push our feelings down, it actually is not as strong of an option and it's actually not a great long term plan. So the courageous act in this moment is to be with whatever it is that you're feeling. And some of you might be like, "Great, Jen, how do I do that?" What do you mean? Say you're saying, "Be with my feelings." I don't even know what that means. Or you might be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't be with my feelings. They're too overwhelming." And if you have a part of you that is afraid your feelings would overwhelm you, I get it. And it might even be possible that in the past that your feelings have overwhelmed you. And so I just want to say, if especially if you have a trauma history, like for sure most of us ADHDers have unresolved wounds, which you may call trauma from the constant criticism, correction, and negative feedback we got because of our ADHD, right? That a lot of us learned to mask because we were taught that we were inherently unacceptable in our natural form. So I call that trauma. You can call it what you want to call it. But for those of us with trauma histories, whether it's that and something else or that alone, I, I want to say sometimes we need guidance from an outside person to work through our big feelings. Sometimes we can do it on our own. I suspect there's a chance if you've never been to therapy and you've pushed down your feelings all your life because you're a Gen Xer and that's what you were taught to do, it might be time to seek support. And whether that's from a coach like me to talk about the big feelings and help you make a more of a strategic plan going forward, or you need to meet with a therapist to actually unpack some of the deeper stuff, it might be time for that. But if you feel comfortable working with feelings on your own, what you might start with is noticing any parts of you that are like, oh, hell no, we can't feel those feelings. We will fall apart, sister, because those parts have valid concerns. And it's not that you would actually for sure fall apart. It's that in the past, when you were younger and didn't have the skills that you have by now, you may have fallen apart with big feelings or someone told you would, right? And I don't know that falling apart is necessarily terrible. It just, I think most of us want to be able to get out of bed and do what we need to do for our lives and for a lot of us, our businesses. So I understand that this part of you is concerned and there might be some work there for you to, when I say work to me, that's writing. You might be reflecting. You might be a verbal processor. So you talk aloud to the part or you seek out a therapist to help you do that, but to really work with the concerns that you have inside about feeling the feelings, if there are any. That would be what I would say is the first step. And remember, we're not trying to push parts down. So if there's a part of you that's like, I don't know, this sounds like a bad idea, I'm not suggesting you railroad over that part. It's actually the opposite. We lean in and we get curious and it's like, "Hey, what's that about? What are we afraid would happen if this part has the part? What are you afraid would happen if we did feel those big feelings, if you did step back and allow those feelings?" And that's where some of the work is. That's where some of the work is. And then as you get to touch some of those bigger feelings, maybe you're already in touch with them, maybe they just came flooding out anyway, um, which is possible and definitely to be expected. I think some people who are feeling numb right now might be in the first camp I talked about, but there may be some of you in this second camp who just have all these big feelings, lots of crying, lots of fear, things like that. Then for you, the work can more immediately go to working with the feelings, which hopefully we'll all get there. But it again is naming the different parts of you coming up. There's probably parts of you who are scared. There's probably parts of you who are sad, maybe grieving what you hoped your life would be. Although I want to say we don't know what's going to happen yet. There's uncertainty there. We don't know if they can actually do what they say they want to do. So, like, the grief might be premature, but I get it. I get why it's there. And so to understand these different feelings as parts of you holding them and to lean in and get curious and allow yourself to feel the feelings coming up. Really let yourself do it. For me, I'll usually start by writing to the different parts of me and letting them sometimes just write, "I'm scared of this, I'm scared of that," or "I feel upset about this." And then eventually that can lead to me actually sitting with the feeling, letting myself cry, letting myself be with it. Sometimes music can help with that. But it's important that we work through these feelings so that, first of all, they're not negatively impacting you in terms of mental health or illness long term, but also so you can get back on track and do what you came here to do. I subscribed to Heather Cox Richardson's email newsletter after I listened to Brene Brown interview her. And one of the things that she said, she's a historian, if you're not familiar with her, brilliant woman, my gosh. And the podcast with Brene, by the way, is fantastic. I'll see if I can link it in my show notes. I think I can do that, but really good one. And they unpack how we got here. Like, how did we get here? And to this place where half of the voters thought, yeah, this looks good. Or we think they thought that. And so it's a brilliant conversation. They had the conversation before the election, so they didn't know half the voters. But at any rate, it's a really good conversation. But I subscribed to her email newsletter, and in it, at the end, she said, and I don't know that she said we need to work through the feelings so we can do this, but I'm saying we need to work through the feelings so we can do what she said, which is to organize and mobilize and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom, justice, and the future that we all know we can build together. And there may be parts of you coming up as I say that go, I don't know if I know that anymore. And I get that. I get that. There's some doubt with what's happened. At the same time, if we zoom out the lens from our current standpoint throughout all of history, we have gone through many things and we have always overcome. Women have gone through many things and have always come out of it stronger. And that even if these times are hard, we're still going to be able to do that. We're still going to figure it out. But if you're having big feelings come up for you right now, or parts of you going, nope, we're doomed, I get it. And that's where the work is. That's where the work is. One of the things I'm noticing is this urge to check. I want to check social media, or more than that, I want to check the news. I want to check my email and look for some kind of certainty. So that's something to dig into if you're noticing this urge, right? I'm like, what? Maybe there's like, I think what I'm searching for is good news. Like, that's kind of what I figured out that part is doing. But you might be noticing that. And if that's what's coming up for you, start to get curious about what's going on. start to build a relationship with your inner world so that you can more strongly navigate this moment as well as your business. Because, like I said before, uncertainty is just as common in business as anywhere else. And so are big feelings, whether we're facing rejection and it's triggering our RSD, or something doesn't go as intended and we keep trying and trying, we're frustrated and upset and hurt or whatever, big feelings come. And so learning to work with them is really, really important. The other thing I want to say, and this might not be the part that you're ready to hear yet. I don't know where we're all going to be 2 weeks from me recording this or where any one person will be. But when you're ready for it, it's important to start to shift your thinking. And let me back up before I forget this. One of the things that's important right now is to stay connected. There's an urge to isolate. There's an urge. Last night I was like, oh, I could just have some wine right now. There's an urge to isolate and numb out. And I didn't. I chose not to because I knew I would feel worse today. So I get that urge to numb out, that urge to isolate. And yet, the thing that is already helping me feel better, not great, but feeling more hopeful about what we can do and be able to do the work I'm doing, is connection, connecting with others, talking about it, working through the feelings. So that connection is a really, really important piece, and we'll talk about that. But one of the things I want to talk about too is, as you're ready, it's important to start to shift some of how you're thinking about this situation. And one of those things, this is something I heard people talking about a lot in therapy sessions the day we found out. And it was that this fear that half of the voters, which was interpreted in most people's brains of half of our country, doesn't care about my rights. And it sure feels that way. I initially felt that way. I was like, oh, I guess half of our country doesn't care about women, even though some of them are women. But that's curious, right? Why would women not care about their own rights? And, that has me thinking, but also something Brene said in her interview with Heather Cox Richardson also has me thinking along these lines. Is it really that people don't care about your rights, that they're actively trying to take them away? And I would say there probably are some people who are. Absolutely. There are some people who are. But one of the things Brene was talking about, and this really is important to recognize, is a lot of people are just trying to go to work, maybe get their kids to school, do whatever, so that maybe they're not paying as close of attention as some of us are to understand exactly what the president-elect and the people he has appointed or will appoint uh, promise to do. They may not see that, or they may be buying into the falsehood that the economy is terrible right now. The economy is actually booming. Yes, prices are higher, but that has a lot less to do with inflation and a lot more to do with corporate greed and them taking advantage of a moment when we think there's inflation. There's all kinds of data on that. People have been misled. People have just are just doing what they can, maybe not paying as close attention. Sure, there's some people who are like, "Yep, I don't think it's okay for trans people to exist." Okay, that's definitely one of the things we're talking about. Or, "I believe women should be in the home. Women shouldn't have as many rights as men." Yeah, those are people actively going against your rights. I just I'm having a hard time believing that is the majority of people, especially when I've talked to people in the past who have supported someone like Trump. As a therapist, I used to live and work in a very conservative area. And what I saw a lot, what I actually saw a lot, and I wasn't planning on talking about this today, so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole here too much, but I saw a lot of people who had a lot of fear that was wrapped up in bravado. And the fear was clearly connected to their trauma history, both from I worked with a lot of military at that time, but also from their youth. Also, men who weren't allowed to feel feelings and, have fears, but didn't have a way to express them appropriately except through a big scary truck or guns or joining the army. So, and I'm not saying all people in the army are like that, by the way. I worked at Fort Carson. I'm not saying have anything against them, but I'm just saying some of the people I saw, I witnessed this woundedness and that they too are afraid. And that it's not necessarily, people fear what they don't understand. And so when someone swoops in and explains it to them in a way that makes sense with their narrative rather than the actual reality, they take it because that fear, that uncertainty is too much. So I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of people also just not really being connected to like experts. Any economist, if you ask them right now, they'll say the economy is booming, and they will also say that Obama left us with a fantastic economy, but that's not the story that people paint. And so, yes, I realize I'm getting into some misinformation things, so I don't wanna go down this path too much, but I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of the people that I worked with in the past that supported these kinds of policies, these kinds of people to put policies in place weren't necessarily actively vindictive towards people like you and me. That a lot of it was fear and misinformation, probably that the information was sought out from fear. And so the reason why is that important? Here's why that's important. If your brain right now or a part of you is thinking, yep, half the country hates me and doesn't care about my rights, then it's a problem because that might not be true. There are probably definitely people there who don't. People here, I should say, because I'm here too. But that's not necessarily the reality, and the reason it's important to understand that is because if you think about it, when you say to yourself notice it, when you say to yourself, "Yep, half our country doesn't like me, care about my rights. Half my country hates me and doesn't care about my rights." Ah, I just said that. What do you notice? What do you notice when you say that? What do you notice in your body? I immediately notice, like, a huge giant ball of anxiety that was, like, on fire that just popped right up into my chest, and I noticed some inner panic right now. And take a breath, thinking that. And of course there's panic thinking that because then the world doesn't feel safe. But it's not actually true that half the country doesn't care about your rights or actively chose to take them away. I truly believe a lot of the people who voted for him don't really fully see what he is promising. And I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, basically. I'm not in any way saying anyone's stupid. I want to be very clear about that. It's just, I think a lot of people, like Brene said, are just trying to get through their day. They just voting is one more thing. Maybe they didn't take it as seriously as perhaps some of us did. So I know I spent a lot of time on that, but it's something I saw a lot of people struggling with so far. And I just wanted to talk about it because that's maybe where addressing some of those limiting beliefs, making sure we're not adding limiting beliefs that half our country hates us. That's not a useful thing to do for your life or your business. And it's going to make it really hard to move past the fear. It's going to keep you in your fight or flight response, possibly your shutdown response, because your nervous system's going to be like, yep, the world's no longer safe ever. And that may feel very, very true right now. And the reality is, we don't know what's going to happen. And the other reality is, this podcast will come out 2 months before the inauguration. We still have 2 months to enjoy, and who knows? I'm not saying, like, that'll be the last 2 months, but let's not wreck what we have now with worries about the future. Instead, what we can do is work through these big feelings that are super valid and figure out, how do I use my voice now? How do I take that call to action from Heather Cox Richardson to organize, mobilize, and stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future we all know we can build together? And if you're still here, I've got some ideas. I'm just going to share some of the things that have been helping me so far. And like I said, this is November 7th, so there may be more and more resources coming your way. I'm finding it very, very helpful to listen to people who are very intelligent when it comes to history and world events and dealing with big things like this. I'm finding Brene Brown very soothing. Kind of always do though, so I might be biased there. Heather Cox Richardson, she like I said, she's a historian. She sees the big zoomed out lens of this. I'm finding her really helpful. One of my friends sent me a Substack, which I'm brand new to, so I think that's what it is called from I think Dan Rather posted it, and that was helpful, but it actually cited Robert I think it's Robert Reich is how you say his name. It cited his newsletter, and so I subscribed to his newsletter. I'm finding that useful. One of the things I'm gonna tell you, and I'm in no way trying to push any kind of religion on anyone, I wanna be clear, I'm not religious myself. And I'm part of a Unitarian Universalist community, which technically has the word church in it, but I'm not a big fan of the word church. I just have my own religious trauma there that that word doesn't work for me. But Unitarian Universalist communities there's no creed, first of all. So not everyone agrees on what they believe in spiritually. My community has atheists, it has active Christians who just don't align with the way some of the Christian churches are. Lots of recovering Catholics like me. Uh, we've got some people who follow the Buddhist philosophy, people of all walks of life, agnostic folks, everybody, Jewish folks. And what I like about it is a space where we just all come together in community and kind of be spiritual together in our own ways, but all together have really interesting, deep conversations where it's safe to respectfully disagree. And one of the core values of Unitarian Universalist communities is social justice. And so there is a real heavy emphasis on social justice. So the community I'm in is focused on racial justice, climate justice, and housing justice specifically. And it's really beautiful to be part of that community. And so whether you find a UU close to you, I'm finding that really soothing for me, or you find other organizations near you that you could be a part of that might support you right now, that might be a way for you to take action, to have a voice. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be big at all. Once you get out of the big feelings, I find that it can really, really help to get into action so that you don't feel helpless, so that you don't just feel like this is happening to you and then get into your fight or flight and shut down responses. I have done that through many, many ways. There is I think it's called Five Calls. It's an app. It's a very progressive app. So if your politics are not very, very progressive, you may not appreciate it, but it's an app that tells you who your representatives in the government are, and it gives you scripts of what you can say when you call them. And so it makes it easier. But again, those scripts are very progressive. So you can modify the script. You don't have to do it that exact way, but it helps you be able to do that. And so that's one way to take action that can really help. I used to be terrified to call. And what I realized, it's just an aid on the other end. You're not actually going to talk to that person. It's not like when you call, it's not like when you call Joe Biden's office, you talk to Joe Biden. Like, you talk to an aide and they basically are just tallying the results. They're not concerned about what you say. It's just an aide. They're happy you're calling. They write down what you say, right? If you leave a voicemail, you share your address so they know if you're a constituent or not. I find that helpful, but also you can do resist bot. You text resist to this. It's like a phone number. Just Google resist bot. But that's another way. And then you can text what you want your message to be, and they can fax it or email it. There's just all these different things. Sometimes what I do to make it easier is I'll copy and paste what Five Calls says I should say on the call and kind of modify it for my own self. And so it sounds good on a fax versus a phone call. And then I'll send that. And so those are two ways that if you're ready to take action, actually three, because joining a community, but also if you're ready to speak out, have your voice heard, that's another way. So hopefully you have a clear plan as promised to first Be in this moment, be with this moment, be with others in this moment. Feel the feelings. They're valid. There's it's not helpful to push them down and push them away. It's just that eventually we don't want them to take over your life and just be like your new normal that you just walk around crying all the time. Uh, that can be your new normal if you want it to be. I just suspect if you're an entrepreneur, that's not what you want. So, give this moment some space. Give yourself some space and time to feel the feelings and work with it. And then when you're ready, step into action. Step into action. It will help you feel less helpless and it will help you take back your inner power, your potency, so that you can rise to the moment. All right, y'all, that's all I have for today. I hope this was helpful. It's a hard thing to talk about, I'm not gonna lie. It was kinda, I'm still fresh off of everything. By the time you've heard this, you might hear people being more organized about it, but I have some backlog on how long it takes for a podcast to get out. So hopefully this will still meet the moment. And my heart is with you wherever you're at in the process. Take care.